He punched a car so hard he left a dent. He walked off a film set mid-scene and refused to return. And he once told a co-star exactly where they could shove their method acting nonsense. This is Sir Anthony Hopkins, two-time Academy Award winner, Knight of the British Empire, Hannibal Lecter, one of the greatest actors ever to grace the screen. But here's what they don't tell you about the legendary Welshman. For over 5 decades, he's despised actors, not acting. Actors. The people who do it. He's said it himself. He loves the craft, but hates most of the practitioners. And at 87 years old, he's done pretending. Behind the measured performances and the cultured accent lies a man with a volcanic temper. A recovering alcoholic who channeled decades of rage into his work. Someone who walked away from theater because he couldn't stand the pretension. And an actor who's clashed with some of Hollywood's biggest names in ways that would end most careers. 5 actors felt his wrath more than any others. 5 names that pushed him past his breaking point. From method actors who took things too far, to co-stars who couldn't match his discipline, to directors who thought they could control him. What happened between them reveals the real Anthony Hopkins, not the gentleman we see at award shows. The fighter who's been battling himself and everyone around him since the beginning. Before we dive in, if you love discovering the untold stories behind Hollywood legends, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're exposing the feuds, the conflicts, and the personalities that never make it to the red carpet. Number 5. Mickey Rourke. It was supposed to be a straightforward thriller. 2 professionals doing their jobs. Instead, it became a daily test of Hopkins' patience, culminating in the moment he punched a car hard. Enough to leave a permanent dent and walked off the set forever. The year was 1990. The film was Desperate Hours, directed by Michael Cimino. Mickey Rourke was cast opposite Hopkins, and from the very first scene, Hopkins knew they had a problem. Rourke was deep into his method acting phase. He stayed in character between takes. He improvised physically, and he refused to break the fourth wall of performance, even when the cameras weren't rolling. During their first scene together, Rourke, still in character, thumped Hopkins on the shoulder without warning. It wasn't part of the script. It wasn't discussed beforehand. It was Rourke being Rourke, living the moment. Hopkins' reaction was immediate. He recalled years later that the unexpected hit made him so angry, he punched the side of the car they were filming next to in genuine rage. Leaving a visible dent in the metal, the crew froze. Cimino kept filming, and Hopkins stood there, fist still clenched, realizing he'd just lost control on a professional set for the first time in years. But that was just the beginning. Hopkins remembered Rourke getting physically aggressive throughout production, pushing boundaries that had nothing to do with the scene and everything to do with his approach to acting. Who'd spent years mastering the craft through preparation and discipline. Rourke's behavior was the antithesis of everything he believed in. Hopkins has always been vocal about his disdain for method acting. He's called it pretentious nonsense, a crutch for actors who can't actually act. The breaking point came when Rourke pushed him around once again during filming. Hopkins had finally had enough. He looked at Rourke and thought to himself that he was done with this, and walked off the set. Production halted. The director panicked, but Hopkins didn't care. He'd reached his limit. He did eventually return to finish the film, but the damage was done. Hopkins dreaded going to work each day, never knowing what version of Rourke would show up, or what physical surprise awaited him. The final irony? After all the chaos, after all the pushing and punching and method madness, Rourke sent Hopkins a note at the end of production that revealed he didn't like actors much either, but had enjoyed working with Hopkins. Hopkins found the sentiment relatable, but it didn't erase the experience. The film bombed. The reviews were terrible. And Hopkins walked away with a story he'd tell for decades about the actor who made him angrier than almost anyone in his career. Number 4. Diana Rigg. Some feuds explode in shouting matches. Others freeze into something far more uncomfortable. For 2 weeks on a BBC production, Anthony Hopkins and Diana Rigg performed the most intimate scenes imaginable without speaking a single word to each other off camera. It was 1982, and they were filming Little Eyolf, an Ibsen play for the BBC. Hopkins and Rigg had worked together a decade earlier in a national theater production of Macbeth without major issues, but something had changed between them. A TV director named James Selin Jones actually warned the little AOF director not to cast them together, saying it was insanity because Hopkins was difficult to work with and he and Rigg simply didn't get along. The warning was ignored, and from day one, the tension was palpable. Director Michael Darlow watched nervously as Hopkins and Rigg performed the most emotional, intimate dialogue without exchanging a single word beyond the Ibsen text. For 2 entire weeks, they acted opposite each other in marriage scenes, love scenes, conflict scenes, and never once spoke casually between takes. The crew noticed immediately. One script supervisor pulled Darlow aside and asked if he'd noticed that the 2 stars didn't seem to want to know each other. Everyone knew. But what could he do? They were professionals. They showed up. They delivered their lines. They just refused to acknowledge each other's humanity outside of the performance. The explosion came in the 3rd week. Darlow summoned the courage to suggest they begin working on the difficult 3rd act. After their first attempt, he blurted out that it was terrible. Rigg agreed with the assessment. Hopkins did not. He erupted in frustration, though not as dramatically as Darlow had feared. But the outburst revealed what everyone already suspected. These 2 accomplished actors fundamentally couldn't stand working together. What made it worse was Hopkins' state of mind at the time. He was restless, discontent, dreaming of Hollywood stardom while stuck doing BBC productions in England. He admitted he wasn't a good company member and wanted to do things his way. The production limped to completion. Hopkins and Rigg delivered professional performances that viewers praised. But those who were there never forgot the bizarre atmosphere of watching 2 talented actors perform intimacy, while maintaining an icy distance the moment the director called cut. Years later, neither has fully explained what went wrong, but the silence between them spoke louder than any public statement ever could. Number 3. Shirley MacLaine. In Hollywood feuds, both sides usually stay diplomatic. Not this time. Anthony Hopkins publicly called Shirley MacLaine the most obnoxious actress he'd ever worked with. MacLaine's response? She didn't like him either. The film was a change of seasons. Released in 1980, Hopkins and MacLaine played a married couple dealing with extramarital affairs. All 4 people involved spending a weekend at a ski resort together. The premise required chemistry. What they had was antipathy. The production was troubled from the start. Neither the actors nor the viewers enjoyed it. The film bombed critically and financially, and Hopkins had the additional humiliation of being nominated for Worst Actor at the very first Razzie Awards, but the failure of the film paled in comparison to what happened between Hopkins and MacLaine on set. In the aftermath, Hopkins didn't mince words. He called MacLaine the most obnoxious actress he'd ever worked with, a statement he made publicly without trying to soften the blow. MacLaine heard about his comments, and when reporters asked for her response, she said simply that she didn't like him either, but added that he was struggling with sobriety at the time, which made things difficult for him. That last detail cut deep. Hopkins had become sober in 1975, 5 years before filming A Change of Seasons. The implication that his recent sobriety affected his behavior on set was both an explanation and an accusation. Hopkins later addressed his struggles with alcoholism openly. He spoke about having a volcanic anger that he learned to channel, describing his alcoholism as almost a gift, because it gave him access to an abyss that fueled his performances. But in 1980, that anger was still raw, and spending months on a failing film with a co-star he couldn't stand pushed him to his limit. What's remarkable about this feud is how public it became. Most actors hide behind diplomatic language. Hopkins and MacLaine made their mutual dislike unmistakable. Despite their mutual animosity, they shared something in common. Both were blunt personalities who didn't hide their true feelings. The film faded into obscurity. But the feud became Hollywood legend, a reminder that even Oscar winners can clash so completely that professionalism gives way to honest contempt. Number 2. Roger Donaldson. Most actors have that one director they'll never work with again. For Anthony Hopkins, it was Roger Donaldson. What makes this story tragic is that The Bounty became Hopkins' favorite role, despite the hell of making it. The 1984 film reunited Hopkins with Mel Gibson, telling the true story of the famous mutiny with historical accuracy rather than Hollywood melodrama. Hopkins later said the production was so difficult that he promised himself he'd never invest so much emotional effort in something he couldn't control. Again, part of the problem was the location. Filming in Tahiti and actually on ships at sea created brutal working conditions. Injuries happened. The weather was unpredictable, and the tight quarters amplified every personality conflict. Then there was Mel Gibson's drinking. Hopkins, who'd been sober since 1975, watched with concern as Gibson partied his way through the production. Liam Neeson had to act as Gibson's handler, calming him down and extracting him from bar fights in Tahiti. Hopkins remembered Gibson showing up to set with bruises, hungover and apologetic. Hopkins sympathized, understanding those struggles intimately from his own past. But the real conflict was with Donaldson. Before production even started, Donaldson warned Hopkins that he didn't care about his track record or his experience working with Laurence Olivier. The director made it clear he planned to come down hard on Hopkins. Hopkins' response was immediate and unambiguous. He told Donaldson that he'd worked with difficult directors before, including some real bastards, and if Donaldson wanted to give him trouble, Donaldson could find another actor. Both men had drawn their lines. And for the entire production, they circled each other like boxers looking for an opening. Hopkins later admitted they held mutual responsibility for their conflicts, saying that if you want to give him trouble, he'll give it right back. The working relationship was professional but cold. Donaldson pushed for takes Hopkins thought were unnecessary. Hopkins pushed back with the full weight of his talent and stubbornness. The film got made through sheer force of will. 20 years later, they finally reconciled. Donaldson directed Hopkins again in the world's fastest Indian, and this time there were no quarrels. But for 2 decades, neither man had any interest in repeating the experience. The Bounty remained Hopkins' favorite role, and he delivered one of his finest performances as Captain Bligh. Yet the memory of making it never lost its bitter edge. Number 1. The actor he hates most. Himself, some feuds are with co-stars. Others are with directors. But the longest, most brutal conflict Anthony Hopkins has ever waged is with the man in the mirror. At 87, Hopkins has achieved everything an actor can dream of. 2 Academy Awards, a knighthood, roles that will be studied for generations. Yet he spent his entire career fighting the same battle, loving acting while hating actors, including himself. Hopkins grew up working class in Wales. He's admitted that he struggled to reconcile his love for performing with his self-loathing, for being part of what he saw as an overpaid, ego-driven profession. He looked down on actors, including himself, as people who had an easy life compared to the working-class background he came from. The contradiction was made worse by his alcoholism, which reached its breaking point in December 1975, when he woke up in an Arizona Weiss hotel room with no memory of how he'd gotten there. He got sober that year, but the anger didn't disappear. It just found new channels. Hopkins has spoken openly about having volcanic anger that fuels his performances, describing it as rocket fuel that can either power greatness or destroy you completely. That anger shaped every relationship in his career. It drove him away from theater, where he felt suffocated by pretension. It pushed him toward Hollywood, where he thought he could escape. It made him difficult on sets, impatient with directors, contemptuous of method actors, and dismissive of award ceremonies. Despite attending dozens of them, Hopkins has famously said he despises actors, despite being one. He's called the profession filled with people he can't stand. He's walked away from projects, burned bridges, and made enemies simply by being honest about his feelings. Yet he's never stopped acting, because beneath all the anger and contradictions is a man who genuinely loves the craft, who prepares obsessively, sometimes reading lines 200 times until they sound natural, who discards dialogue immediately after filming and never looks back, who approaches every role with a workmanlike discipline that belies his reputation for being difficult. The tragedy of Anthony Hopkins isn't that he hated his co-stars. It's that he spent a lifetime hating himself for being one of them. An actor who can't reconcile his working-class roots with his aristocratic success. A recovered alcoholic who turned self-destruction into art. A knight who still feels like an outsider at 87. He's still working. Still angry? Still brilliant. And still fighting the same war he started over 60 years ago. So which story shocked you most? Was it Hopkins punching a car in rage over Mickey Rourke's method acting? The 2-week silent treatment with Diana Rigg? Or the brutal honesty of his public feud with Shirley MacLaine? These weren't just personality clashes. They were battles that revealed the real man behind the performances. Anthony Hopkins may be one of cinema's greatest actors, but his greatest role has always been trying to make peace with himself. If you want more untold stories about Hollywood legends and the conflicts that shape their careers, subscribe and hit that notification bell. The truth behind the fame is always more fascinating than the illusion. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which Hopkins feud surprised you most? And who should we cover next? Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.